Hi, and welcome to another Type with me. In this week's episode, I want to talk about CSS Houdini. It's a really great feature that will come into the browser, or maybe already is in the browser, and it's something that I think will have a lot of potential to create cool and creative stuff on the web. So what is CSS Houdini? Well, CSS Houdini is a set of APIs that expose parts of the CSS engine. Imagine that you can very easily create extensions on top of CSS, and if CSS doesn't have that feature already, you can just create some kind of feature yourself and bake it into the browser, right? It's a set of APIs, so you can have or can do a lot of things with it. It's a complete suite, and I want to touch a little bit of it here. And here I'm just gonna touch small things. I'm gonna show you a website also where you can read more about it. And I hope in the near future that I can experiment a little bit more with it, and I can show you cool stuff that you can do with it as well. So first of all, you have worklets. Well, worklets are itty bitty webbish workers, right? Worklets are the foundation to how render engines can be extended. You can add modules in JavaScript, and with these modules you can just inject certain functionality into your CSS. Then you have typed OM. Well, typed OM, what is it? Typed OM is an extension to the existing CSS object model that exposes CSS values as typed JavaScript objects instead of a simple string like they are today. So when you want to manipulate certain things within JavaScript, nowadays what we are doing is just provide a string there, and then that string will be converted towards something that CSS can interpret. But for example, opacity accepts a number, right? So we want to have some more control on top of that, and that's why we have typed OM. And then you have custom properties. Custom properties give shape, structure, and constraints to CSS variables. A custom property is something that you already know, I guess. It's a variable within CSS. But then when you place a variable, like for example background color, you cannot enforce that background color needs to be a color. It can be a number also that your end user is typing into, and so you need to enforce it. And with this API you can enforce it that, for example, that variable, that CSS variable, has a certain structure or constraints that the user or the end user can use. And then we have the Paint API. And the Paint API is something like a 2D canvas-like drawing API, and you can use it in your CSS to draw images on the fly with certain properties, right? And also there, that would be something that's very cool, because then you can have external libraries in NPM. People can write cool things around the Paint API. You can use it in your own application, give some kind of parameters to it, and he will draw something for you. Of course, you have other things like an animation API, a layout API, and so forward. So you have a website, Houdini How, and there you have, for example, Worklet library. And here you can very easily see, okay, I want to create some kind of curved line. These are the properties that you want to give towards the worklet, and then you can paint it out onto a background, right? If we want to, for example, see a little bit more about that demo, well, you can very easily do so. You can dive a little bit deeper into it, how the worklet is being written down, and then you can also see how you can use the CSS right here, which in my opinion is great, because then you can learn a little bit more about how they are using CSS Houdini with worklets. Another cool thing here is, for example, Parallax. If I go to the demo here. Let's say full screen, for example, or exit screen. Yeah. Then these are also cool examples of how to use worklets, right? Flashy radius, and then here again, if you go through that, it just draws a flashy radius. Alright. Other cool things are, for example, bubbles, if you want to have bubbles or content. And again, if you want to have more of an animation there, yeah, you need to use the animation API for that, right? So it opens up great and cool things with a lot of parameters that you can put onto to generate something in the background. So like I said, a lot of people will write worklets. And if we go right here, we can say, okay, if we have CSS Paint worklet undefined, then we need to go for a polyfill, right? CSS Paint polyfill.js. And otherwise, we can just do css.paintWorklet.add module, and then we can have the curved line.js. And like we saw here, we can use paint curved line, right? We also need to define certain properties. So for example, if we use this class, custom line 1, we can have these kind of properties defined. Curved line height is 30, curved line width is 5, midnight blue would be the line color, and the line spread would be 20. Pretty easy, right? Again, I hope to create a video how to create certain worklets, but for now, just an introduction on what it is and how you could use it, and maybe there are already created certain worklets for you that you don't need to create it yourself, and you can use it into your own web application. So for example, you have something like this, style.css, right? And then you have your CSS variable, and then here you have blue. But you can also do something like this, 14, for example, and that's fine. You will see that you don't get any complaints about it, or you don't have some kind of validation on it, and that's a little bit of a pity, right? But one thing that you could do within CSS Houdini is define an add property. You will see that, yeah, he complains about it because it's an unknown add rule add property, but this is how you could enforce that it's the syntax of a color, inherits false, and initial value could be blue, for example. And then you will enforce that it needs to be blue. So if you define then your CSS variables, you can very easily create your add properties with this, right? And then say that it has certain rules that CSS recognizes and also can enforce to use there. And like here, for example, if we put something like this, 14, I don't know, yeah. You see here that we have set the background color of an element syntax color, and then normally you would complain he doesn't do that, but yeah, if we define it like add property and then your CSS variable, at least your IDE will say something about it. Maybe there are extensions that will be written so that some validation can be thrown to a developer, so that he knows, like, hey, this CSS variable is of syntax color. Yeah, these are great new things that are coming within CSS Houdini, right? Also within JavaScript, you will see that there will be a new interface for computed style map. where you can say, okay, I want for that element, this div element, the computed style element of font size, and I want to see what font it is. And of course, you want to set inline styles, and you can do that with attribute style map. But here you see that it's not been recognized yet by the HTML div element, right? So they're gonna create something like this, CSS, and then you can have on that CSS namespace .em to set the font size to em, for example, right? There are a lot of things that will come with CSS Houdini, and you'll have a lot of new power to manipulate the CSS engine. I'm really excited about it. I think it will have a lot of potential, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you will dive a little bit deeper into it, and I see you next time. Thank you very much.